I'm Lori Cardoza-Moore, and welcome to Focus on Israel. Hello, and thank you for joining me today on Focus on Israel. I'm Lori Cardoza-Moore, and like most Americans, I began to ask a lot of questions about what happened to our country following 9/11. As I read and talked to experts, the issues of radical Islam and the attacks on America and Israel became extremely personal to me. In response, I founded Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating and sharing the message of Christian biblical responsibility to the people and land of Israel against the rise of a new anti-Semitism. In this series, Focus on Israel, I want to share with you what I've learned through my research and meetings with experts in their respective fields. I believe that it is so very important that at this critical time in history, we must turn our focus on Israel. Today, we're going to be exploring a controversy that seems to have no resolution: peace in the Middle East. International pressure on Israel to give in to the two-state solution continues to rise, and at the same time, Israeli and U.S. relationships are at their lowest level in years. Over the past 3 decades, there has been more than a half dozen peace initiatives between the Palestinians and Israel, but none has resulted in peace, as the divisions appear to defy human ability to solve. I recently had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Shmuel Katz, a surgeon and Middle East historian. He examines the reality and the fantasy of Israel's search for peace.
To talk about realism in the Middle East is like speaking about a dream, and I don't know if it's a good dream, a bad dream, or anything else. But you always hope for peace. You always hope for a better future for the people. And looking around the neighborhood in our days, it's getting more and more complicated. Therefore, good people cannot give up. You have to continue hoping, you have to continue dreaming, you have to continue working for peace, and again, to benefit everybody. The society in Israel, the society in the Arab street, and everywhere else in the free world, because they're all interconnected. If we are talking about a real peace with the Palestinians, and the Palestinians have become a real productive and a society which are looking forward to a better future for the children and grandchildren, their interest is going to be to keep out evil. And their interest is going to be to work closely with Israel, because Israel has a dream of a better future for everybody, Jews and Gentiles alike. And at that moment, if you have a good peace with the Arab Palestinians, then you'll be able to build a future together and stand together against evil. Naturally, Israel will have to make sure that these tendencies and these hopes and these aspirations remain. And therefore, there should be some military cooperation. Israel should have the ability to make sure that these aspirations are really lasting for a long time. Israel by itself will not be able to stop all forces of evil around the world. If you mean stopping a force of evil to invade this territory, it has to be, I would say, even a global effort. Because Israel is a tiny country built in its ancestral homeland. Israel was the original Palestinian people. The Arab Palestinians and the Christians joined later on. The Arabs are trying to take it over. They want to use the term Palestinians as only Arab and no Jewish or Christian connections to that entity. And unless you see a real change in the education in the street, not only in Israel, not only in the Palestinian Authority, which represents the Arab Palestinians, but it has to be also in the Arab states in the neighborhood and beyond. Today you have major threat to peace in the region, not only from the neighboring countries to Israel, but to countries which are further out. Look at Iran, for instance. Turkey is unstable. Egypt, I don't know what's going to happen to them. Iraq, the killing Christians, Jews, whoever is left there without blinking an eye. So we really, if you want to make sure that evil doesn't prevail, we have to make sure that the good people speak up, and they cannot speak up unless they're informed. Once they're informed and they know what they're facing, they'll be able to be more effective in whatever they do. And if you want to tell me that the problem there is land for peace, I have news for you. It's not a question of land, it's a question of peace. And as it is today, it seems that the neighbors of Israel are not aspiring for peace, especially the radical movements, the radical Muslims, who have this dream of international and global caliphate, want to liquidate all the non-believer in stages. They start with Israel, and then they continue all over the world to undermine free society as we know it. They'll undermine the Christian communities wherever they can find them, and they'll try to establish their presence. And I don't have to give you too many examples when you look at the terror that they're running all over the world. The United States, it's England, it's France, it's Spain. So it's an endless problem that has to be really thought seriously after to make sure that we don't relinquish land to people who just want to undermine us and to cause trouble. And therefore, if you want to evacuate any land, it's a major problem because you don't know who's going to fill in this space. Israel tried it at least twice. Once at the disengagement from southern Lebanon. Israel moved all its troops out of the separation zone to make sure that everybody is going to be happy. Israel went back to the internationally recognized border with Lebanon. And even the UN recognized that this is the right thing to do and this is a border that nobody disputes. There was a promise that this area will not be used as a staging area to attack Israel. There was a move even to put in the UN to verify and to secure that border. But what did we get? We got exactly the opposite. Hezbollah became stronger. Iran was supporting them with rockets, with a variety of armaments, which caused havoc and destruction in Israel. Millions of people were under their fire and leaving territories without filling it with a valuable alternative is not an option. The second opportunity Israel had is to leave the Gaza Strip, even though it was part of the Israeli ancestral land. Israel has historical connection to the region. But they decided in Israel that in order to promote peace, let's see what they can do by removing everybody out of Gaza. They removed even the cemeteries from Gaza, so no Jewish dead bodies were left in Gaza. What did Israel get instead? They got rockets, and they got declaration of war, and they got only headaches. If you're going to have a peaceful state next to Israel with a true meaning of peace and tranquility and cooperation, any citizen from any religion should be able to live anywhere they want. Israel was extremely generous in offering to relinquish part of the ancestral homeland to the Arab Palestinians. If you recall, once the Ottoman Empire was dismantled after the First World War, and the entire region was reorganized, Israel received as a promise about 1 part out of 800. So it's 1/800 parts of the piece of land for their future homeland. The Balfour Declaration gave Israel a part of the ancestral homeland. 80% of that land was removed by the British mandate and handed it over to the Hashemite family, which created what we know today as the Kingdom of Jordan. So 80% of the Jewish homeland was already relinquished to an Arab country. The remaining 20% were again a problem in the international eyes. And there were some pressures from the international community to redivide the little sliver of land between the Jews and the Arabs in the region. Israel was very happy to give up another 50% of the remaining 20% just in order to get a real peace. But they didn't have any takers. Israel was ready to do a lot of things towards peace, but unfortunately did not have a party to work with. If you would have a viable and altruistic and a peaceful group of people who want to make peace in the region, Israel is going to be the first one to do it. But for that, you don't have to remove Jews from their own ancestral homeland. You can have a border where people can live in peace and understanding and recognizing each other and make sure that we have a better future for our children and for our grandchildren. The principle of land for peace agreement is practically a fantasy. And once we solve the land issue, there's going to be peace. We have to work the other way around. We have to make sure that we have peace in the communities, that the people are peaceful, and then the land will not matter anymore. Because if you have a good neighbor who takes care of their own people, where the border lines is totally secondary. The Arab countries in that neighborhood control huge, vast territories of land. Israel is only a tiny country which is situated over 1/800th of this territory. The countries around Israel built their own countries also in only recent years. But the appetite is big and the dreams are out of control. They see Israel not as a neighbor, but they see Israel as an intrusion to their territory, even though it belonged to the Jewish people way before any Arab Palestinian or Arab at all was in the neighborhood. But they want to see their own dreams and aspirations realized, especially the radical Muslims. They are believing in a caliphate, in a world which is ruled by their own Sharia law. Israel is an obstacle for that because Israel is a modern, open society which would not go for that. And if they manage to liquidate Israel, then they have another feather in their hat. And they say, great, we eliminated one group of infidels, now we have to go and take care of the rest. And therefore, I don't think that the problem there is a problem of land for peace. The problem is ideology, which is radical Islamic ideology against everybody else. And there, the international community should be able to see the reality and make sure that the radicals don't prevail. If you recall history, the Muslim Brotherhood has their own agenda. And the agenda did not change. The agenda of Hamas did not change. The agenda of Iran did not change. The ways that they want to get over the current situation might be governed by certain diplomacy. It goes exactly in line with the philosophy of Muhammad, the way he was treating the tribe of the Quraysh in Medina. His teaching at the time were that you're allowed to deceive your enemy in order to gain enough power to the point that once you have enough power, you can run them over. And this is what Muhammad did to the Quraysh. He destroyed the tribe once Muhammad gained enough power. This was also one of the favorite excuses of Arafat when he had to explain to his people why he's negotiating with Israel. He said, don't worry, I'm dealing with the treaties of our prophet, which means I'm negotiating with the Israelis until we gain enough power and then we'll run them over.
Next, we'll be hearing from two men who know Middle East politics extensively. First up is Richard Pearl, a renowned political advisor, consultant, and writer who began his career in the 1970s as a senior staff member to Senator Scoop Jackson on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Later, he was heavily involved with the Reagan administration and served as the Assistant Secretary of Defense from 1987 to 2004. He is presently a member of several think tanks, including the Hudson Institute. Next is David Horowitz, a conservative writer, founder, and current president of the think tank the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and editor of Front Page Magazine. He recently founded the organization Students for Academic Freedom, whose goal is combating what it calls the leftist indoctrination in academia. Both of these leaders offer tremendous insight into the mystery of the elusive peace in the Middle East.
Israel's creation was the product of a chain of events, the Balfour Declaration being one of them, the approval by the United Nations being another, that settles the question. There is no issue about Israel's legitimate statehood. There are questions about whether territory that Israel is now occupying is properly being occupied. And that there's a debate on that, and people can differ. At least 2 UN resolutions bear on that. Long forgotten, although they used to be cited all the time, UN resolutions 224 and 338. Which taken together basically reflect the concept that Israel is entitled to retain territory until there is a peace. Because the territory was used as a launching point, and international law on this is pretty clear. If territory is used by one country to attack another, or by a group to attack another, the attacked party has the right to hold on to that territory until there is a peace agreement. And there is now no peace agreement with the Palestinians. There is one with Egypt, and Egypt received back all of its territory, which is the model. So I believe that legally Israel has every right to continue its occupation until such time as there is an agreement. And a peace agreement. And let me add that I think Israelis overwhelmingly are eager for a peace agreement. They just want to be sure that it's not going to be a step on the way to their destruction, which seems to be the prevailing view of many of the people that are now opposing them. I believe a two-state solution is possible. What makes it difficult, in my view, is that commitment to a state is not commitment to a long-term peace, and it is not commitment to accepting the legitimacy of the other state. I think the Israelis are ready, I'm sure the Israelis are ready to accept the legitimacy of a Palestinian state. But as of today, no one can say that the Palestinians are prepared to accept the legitimacy of a Jewish state. They're clearly not, and they express that in a multitude of ways. They produce maps in which there is no Israel, show the region, but there is no Israel. They continue to talk about Israel even within the uncontested borders as an alien implant that must be destroyed. I don't believe there will be a settlement of any kind, of any lasting kind, until the Palestinians are prepared to accept the existence of the State of Israel. Not with a view eventually to destroying it, but saying, all right, we have our state, they have theirs. The task now is for us to find ways to go beyond the formal recognition of each other to a genuinely productive collaboration. And Israel has a great deal to contribute. I believe that the current administration, and I think the Israelis should be doing the same, should be repeating until people are sick of hearing it, the inadmissibility of the fundamental inducement of hatred among Palestinians. I mean, I don't know if you've seen some of the film taken in kindergarten classes, Palestinian kindergarten classes, in which 6-year-olds are marching around with toy suicide vests. The fact that you can buy a toy suicide vest in a market in Hebron is a disgrace. And this propagation of hatred, which can only lead to terrible things, goes on every day. And there's hardly any protest about it. And if I wanted to really advance toward peace and I were the President of the United States, I would give a public speech, which I would cite some of these examples and say this is unacceptable. And we, the United States, much as we would like to encourage a peace between Israel and the Palestinians, will not lift another finger to do that until this propagation of hatred ceases. If you stand up and say, here is a film clip of an event at which the Palestinian leader is asking Allah to praise someone who set off a bomb in a school bus and killed 11 Israeli children. Here is what is being taught in kindergarten. Here is a broadcast of the evening news, Palestinian television. Notice the map behind the presenter. There's no Israel on that map. This adds up to impossible conditions for any serious movement toward peace. And if the whole world starts looking at it that way, it could make a difference. I mean, you have a lot of very naive people in countries like Norway. They haven't a clue in Norway as they write checks for the Palestinians and support organizations that propagate hatred against Israel. They haven't a clue what they're doing. So somebody needs to make that the top of the agenda. And it's basically only the president who could do it, although I think the Israelis could, by saying we will not negotiate further until this problem is addressed, could probably put this issue front and center, which is where it should be. Of the several ways in which this administration has actually made it more difficult to contemplate a peace in the Middle East, the overemphasis on settlements strikes me as the most important. This conflict is not about a few hundred housing units attached to existing housing units as a population grows. The essence of this conflict is the acceptance by the Palestinians of a Jewish state. The settlements are a minor issue blown out of all proportion. But when the President of the United States denounces the settlements in a way that says this makes peace impossible, that puts any Palestinian who might want to show some movement toward peace in an impossible position. How can he be less militant than the president? As long as we keep saying the settlements are the issue and never mentioning the campaign of hatred, it's not surprising that the Palestinians say the settlements are the issue and continue the campaign of hatred.
The war in the Middle East is not about land. The whole Palestinian case is a monster lie. There isn't an inch of Israel on Arab land. It was all controlled, owned, lock, stock, and barrel by the Turks, who aren't Arabs, for 400 years. And they lost the First World War. And 5 countries were created out of the ruins of the Turkish Empire, which is Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Israel. And nobody's accusing the Syrians or the Lebanese or the Jordanians of stealing the land, only the Jews. So, but the New York Times goes along with these lies, the whole liberal media. And you know, the Israelis have done their part there by talking about a peace process. How can you have a peace process with people who want to exterminate you? You can't. The Middle East, it's a holy war. It used to be an Arab war because the Arabs are xenophobic, racists against the Jews. It's going to have a non-Arab people. Well, the Persians aren't Arabs, but not a new non-Arab people. And then it became a Muslim war. And now it's a Muslim holy war. The Jews have to be driven into the sea because they're not Muslims. And the Christians too. Christian communities in the Middle East are dying, or they're being killed, is more accurate.
The time to stand up is now. Be a leader in your community and in your church. One person can make a difference. Get involved and support pro-Israel organizations such as PJTN. Visit our website to learn more. Sign up to receive free newsletters, action alerts, daily blogs, and order our films to share with others. Please encourage your family and friends to tune in and check the PJTN website for scheduled showings of Focus on Israel. God bless you and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren and all Israel. We'll see you next time on Focus on Israel.
Focus on Israel is now available on DVD. Each program DVD contains a wealth of bonus materials, including the premiere program that started it all, Focus on Israel, program number 1. Also, bonus interview cuts with experts in their respective fields. Informational videos from PJTN documentaries, including Israel Indivisible, the case for the ancient homeland. Lest we forget 9/11 and the rise of Islam. The Forgotten People, Christianity and the Holocaust. Disinformation, the secret strategy to destroy the West. Plus the award-winning music video, The Forgotten People. Focus on Israel program DVDs, great educational tools to combat anti-Semitism. Arm yourself and order today. Please go online to pjtn.org. To order, just click on the Store tab. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you and thank you for your support and prayers.